Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Patryk Witkowski and I am joined today by Sandra White, former SNP MSP. Thank you for joining me. Say hello.
Thank you very much for having me.
Fantastic. For our first story of the day, we've got the Ukraine update, day 728 of the conflict. Russia launched 19 attack drones at Ukraine over Tuesday night and this morning, as well as 6 missiles, with Ukrainian air defenses destroying 13 of the drones and 1 missile, the Ukrainian Air Force has said. Unconfirmed reports on Russian social media channels accompanied by photos and video claimed 65 Russian soldiers were killed by a Ukrainian missile strike at Trudivske in the Volnovakha district of Ukraine's Donetsk region on Tuesday. 11 Ukrainian children who had been taken away by Russia crossed the border from Belarus back into Ukraine on Tuesday evening. At a humanitarian crossing on the Belarus border, the children hugged waiting family members. The children had been received by Qatar's embassy in Moscow on Monday under a scheme mediated by the Qataris. Russia's top general, Valery Gerasimov, has visited troops in Ukraine, according to Russian state media. Gerasimov was shown awarding medals to Russian troops involved in taking Avdiivka, and he was given a report by the commander in charge of a Russian assault on Avdiivka. Colonel General Andrei Mordvichev, state media said. Russia's FSB secured... Now we have an update from Westminster interrupting the Ukraine. We'll be straight back to this after seeing what's happening at Westminster right now with the ongoing motion for a ceasefire in Gaza.
I wish to respond to the point raised by the Leader of the House. Today's debate was exceptional in its intensity, with which all parties wish to secure a vote on their own propositions. It took the decisions which were intended to allow the House the widest range of propositions, widest range of propositions on which to express a view. I wanted to do the best, and it was my wish. It was my wish to do the best by every member of this House. I take very seriously. No. The danger is that that's why I wanted everybody to be able to express, because I am very, very concerned about the security of all members. Let me just take this through. I was very concerned, I am still concerned, and that's why the meetings I've had today is about the security of members, their families and the people that are involved. And I've got to say, I regret how it's ended up. It was not my intention. I wanted all to ensure they could express their views and all sides of the House could vote. As it was, in particular, the SNP were ultimately unable to vote on their proposition. I am, and I regret, with my sadness, that it's ended up on like that, in this position. That was never my intention for it to end up like this. I was absolutely convinced that the decision was done with the right intentions. I recognise the strength of feeling of members on this issue. Clear today has not shown the House at its best. I will reflect on my part in that of the course I recommit myself to ensuring that all members of this House are treated fairly. I do not want it to have ended like this. I want to say to the House, I will meet with all the key players of each party. I think it is right that I meet with each one and that Can I just put that correct? I've never met with Sue Gray today. I didn't bump into her today. I'm offended by that comment. I think you'd like to withdraw it. Yeah, because that is the danger that we've ended up with this house in speculation of not what is fact and not factual. I am honest to this house. I am true to this house. I believe in all members of this house. And I have tried to do what I thought was the right thing for all sides of this house. It is regrettable, and I apologise for a decision that didn't end up in the place that I wished for. So I would say no. I say no. I will meet with all the. Just be quiet, please. I will meet with the leaders and with the chief whips, and let us have a discussion on what is the best way forward to try and ensure that, and I say again, I thought I was doing the right thing and the best thing, and I regret it and I apologise for how it's ended up. I do take responsibility for my actions, and that's why I want to meet. And that's why I want to meet with the key players who have been involved. Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for coming to the House, for saying that you will reflect on what has happened today, for offering your apologies and to meet with members of this House. You're our Speaker, and we wish you to defend the rights of all members of this House. And I thank you for recommitting yourself to those responsibilities today and for coming to the floor of the House.
Just to respond to that is why I tried to do that in the first place. It ended up in the wrong place. And I do say I apologise to all, and in particular to the SNP. And I say it's not where I wanted, it is where I am. I will now leave it at that for the moment, but I do want to meet as soon as possible. Point of order, Stephen.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Can I firstly begin by echoing your sentiments in relation to the debate that was had in this chamber in relation to the most important of matters with regards to the safety of civilians in Gaza and indeed those in Israel. There has been a difference of view in the House today, but I think that difference of view has been expressed in a way which we can all agree has been in a positive fashion, in the best fitting way of any democracy, any functioning democracy. Mr. Speaker, whilst I acknowledge your apology, the reality is that you were warned by the clerks of the House that your decision could lead to the SNP not having a vote on our very own opposition day. As a result, we have seen the SNP opposition day turn into a Labour Party opposition day. I'm afraid that that is treating myself and my colleagues in the Scottish National Party with complete and utter contempt. And I will take significant convincing that your position is not now intolerable.
To respond to that, and quite rightly, I understand the feeling. As I said, I would like to have that conversation in private. I would like to meet with you as soon as possible. I'm now going to leave it to continue. Sorry. Point of order. No, come.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I just make a point of order that actually the amendment in the name of the Leader of the Opposition was this evening passed unanimously, and therefore, yes, it was, and therefore.
Order. I don't think now is the time, and what I want to do, I want to move on and I want to meet with the important players. I'm now going to hand over to the Deputy, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Deputy.
Unbelievable.
Welcome back. So, I suppose we should catch up the listener to what's been happening over the last 30 minutes, in case they haven't been watching. I suppose, Sandra, you can fill in what little facts I miss here. I'm going to try to give like a rundown of what's been going on. Today was meant to be SNP Opposition Day, which is assigned to them as a day where they can sort of control the dialogue in Parliament, lead a motion, and vote on a matter and lead debate over it. The matter that they wanted to discuss and the matter that they wanted to vote on was an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, a call for an immediate ceasefire. Labour responded to this motion with a few of their own amendments, getting rid of some of the wording of the SNP motion, changing it a little bit, maybe calling more for a humanitarian pause, making differences of ensuring that Hamas makes certain compromises first, regardless of the details, essentially just changing the SNP motion, making it their own, and they were going to have a vote on it today. What the House Speaker wasn't present, and the House Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, took place, and the decision on how today's Opposition Day was going to be handled was that Labour will get to vote on their amendment to the motion first, and if that amendment passes, the SNP will then get to vote on the amended version of their original motion. Now, the reason that this caused an issue is because if Labour did, in fact, pass the vote on their amendment to the motion, the SNP would have never gotten the chance to vote for their original wording, for their original plan of what kind of ceasefire they wanted. Do you think that covers most of the basis there?
Yeah, Patrick, I think you've covered most of how the disgraceful behaviour in the House of Commons, Westminster, supposed to be a democracy, the mother of Parliament, and it just descended into an outright disgraceful performance by the Speaker, for one thing, to change the rules and regulations, go against the Chief Clerk's, telling him that this had never happened before. I think it happened twice, about 30 years ago or something, on a completely different issue. If this had been handled properly, what normally happens is a motion would be debated and an amendment would be debated. And if the amendment had overwhelming support, then it would be up to the movers of the motion whether they accepted it or not. Obviously, if the votes were greater for the amendment than the motion, then that would become the motion with the amendments. We've did it before in the Scottish Parliament, but never to that extent where you don't even get a chance to speak to your substantive motion. That is the rules and regulations.
Right.
I've never seen anything like this in my life. And I can understand the complete frustration and anger from the SNP benches,
Right.
which basically, from what I can see, has been a complete stitch-up to stop the SNP from mentioning their motion.
And
We
to add
only
on to that,
get 3 chances of an opposition debate a year, and that has been scuppered. And Stephen Flynn was absolutely right. It turned into a Labour opposition day, and Westminster is a laughingstock anyway. But it just shows you it does not serve the people, not just of Scotland, but of the whole of the UK as well. And I'm pretty frustrated and annoyed myself, as any Democrat should be. We're talking about people's lives here in Gaza, and they have turned it, the opposition, they've turned Gaza into even a worse genocide than it is just now. And it's purely politics from Labour and the Tories and the Lib Dems, nothing to do with the people of Gaza. And they should be ashamed of themselves. Ashamed.
and I suppose to maybe emphasize the point, the only reason this didn't become, as you would call it, a Labour opposition day instead of the assigned SNP opposition day that it was meant to be, was because the SNP made the dramatic decision to walk out of the chamber. They performed a walkout. They stepped out. They didn't.
No, they didn't walk out, because I checked that and spoke to a number of them. They walked out of the chamber and went into the lobby to vote yes. And then they were waiting in the lobby so they could get in to vote yes.
Oh yeah.
And then the Tories put forward that it be heard in private. That's what happened. Yes, not because they couldn't vote. Yes, they were
No,
in the
yeah,
lobby,
of course. I meant
couldn't
the only
vote.
reason that they were able to sort of, I suppose, reclaim the conversation was by stepping out. I'm sorry if I misphrased that at all. That is what I meant to
That's
say.
fine, Patrick. Things have moved so quickly, and even I was getting confused with what was going on. And I'm sure if you're sitting in Westminster, you'd be just as confused as well with the antics that were going on in the place. And I wouldn't wish anybody to go to Westminster because it's a place I don't think democracy is actually, it's corrupt.
Is there a wider message here? Is there a sort of wider context where SNP specifically Opposition Day could just be, in your words, essentially hijacked like this?
Yep.
Does that say something for wider UK politics, for wider Westminster politics?
Well, absolutely. A precedent has been set by Lindsay Hoy, and he should resign. He should resign. Whether what's been said about he was nobbled or whatever, I don't know if that's true or not. If it is true, absolutely he should resign. But he should resign on this particular issue because it's not just the SNP, it could affect all of our opposition debates, but it also affects every party that's in there. But you can see that the two so-called big parties, Tory and Labour, and then you've got the kind of runt of that, the Lib Dems, all got together. So how can that be democracy? It is not democratic. Sooner we get independence and get rid of them, the better the better for everybody.
Thank you so much. Returning to the Ukraine story, the next bulletin was that Russia's FSB security services said it had arrested a U.S.-Russian woman suspected of treason for raising funds for the Ukrainian army. The SFB is the central Ural city of Ekaterinburg, and said that the 33-year-old woman was a resident of Los Angeles with dual citizenship. Ukraine's military on Tuesday dismissed claims by Russia of full control over the village of Krinky, on the eastern bank of the Dnipro River in the southern Kherson region. Reports of the situation varied, with no reliable confirmation. Ukrainian forces crossed the Dnipro last November and captured districts in the eastern bank, including Krinky. Following the fall of Avdiivka, the US-based Institute for the Study of War said Russian actors had conducted a cyber operation aimed at generating panic in the Ukrainian information space and weakening Ukrainian morale. President Biden has stressed that $61 billion in U.S. aid for Ukraine will mostly be spent in the United States, making munitions and equipment for Ukrainians. Biden said that while the bill sends military equipment to Ukraine, it also spends the money right here in the United States of America, in places like Arizona, where the Patriot missiles are built, and Alabama, where the Javelin missiles are built, in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Texas, where artillery shells are made. Protests from Polish farmers on Tuesday marked an escalation from previous demonstrations, with a near-total blockade of all Ukrainian border crossings and disruption at ports and on roads nationwide. Ukraine said on Tuesday it was fighting off dozens of Russian attacks, a few days before the 2-year anniversary of the war, and as Ukraine marked 10 years since dozens of protesters were shot by pro-Putin government forces in Kiev during Ukraine's Revolution of Dignity. On Tuesday, the Ukrainian Army General Staff said there had been 81 combat clashes over the past 24 hours, adding that Russian forces had carried out 87 airstrikes. 5 civilians dead in a drone attack on a village near the Russian border in Ukraine's Sumy region, the army had said. Passing over to you, Sandra. What do you think of the ongoing situation in Ukraine and how it has developed over time?
commented on this on numerous occasions, as other have as well. But Patrick, you mentioned the fact that President Biden had said that the monies that they're putting forward to Ukraine would be spent in the USA creating arms, and you mentioned Pennsylvania and the various areas, the states in America that would be making these weapons. It's as if there's going to be an election there, which we all know there will be. But to equate the fact that they're spending the money in America to keep jobs in America and actually making arms makes you think that America, Biden anyway, has been listening to some of the reports that have been coming out, not just from Ukraine or possibly Russia, that the money that is being given to Ukraine is being spent wrongly. And it seems to be they're batting that back by saying this is creating jobs in America. So that, to me, that's something that should be looked into. It's a bit of a worry to me. Something else which I had known because I had someone over there was that Blinken had visited Ukraine last week, and there was huge banners welcoming America with his face on it and the American flags. Now I can only assume Blinken was there, and I think I did see a report about it, to talk to Ukraine about NATO and joining NATO. So there's so many partners being involved in this, and yet the innocent victims in all of this are the Ukrainian people, basically, who are being sent to war. We know the army, they're taking everyone from the army, Russia as well. So I'm really worried how long this is going to last for. And is there going to be an end to this? Is there going to be an end to it? The only people that seem to be getting anything out of this are the arms company that are making the arms to supply, as the president said, Ukraine. So for me, it's a real worry. We're over 2 years now, and nothing has really changed. In fact, Russia looks as though its economy is greater, GDP is greater than other countries, and it looks as though it's becoming more powerful, even though we've got all these messages from America. I worry about what's the end game in this. Is there an end game? I don't think there is. I think it's continue going on and on. I mean, you think of Blinken going to Ukraine,
Right.
and basically talking about NATO, and I've said this before, I really have suspicions about NATO and what it's doing. That's my opinion on that. Nobody else, it's just my personal opinion on it.
Thank you. For our next story, we have the latest from Israel and Gaza. Israeli strikes across Gaza killed at least 67 Palestinians overnight and into Wednesday, including in areas where civilians have been told to seek refuge. Aid group Doctors Without Borders said that 2 people were killed when a shelter housing staff in the Gaza Strip was struck during an Israeli operation. The UN World Food Programme, WFP, has announced it is pausing deliveries of food aid to northern Gaza. This comes after incidents on 18th and 19th of February when WFP says convoys were unable to deliver aid as planned, largely due to the breakdown in civil order. It said a truck was looted and the driver beaten. Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has reacted to a Knesset vote endorsing his stand against a unilaterally declared Palestinian state by saying the Knesset came together in an overwhelming majority against the attempt to impose on us the establishment of a Palestinian state, which would not only fail to bring peace, but would endanger the state of Israel. The IDF claims to have recovered weapons including an RPG and an AK-47 rifle, and has located dozens of terror infrastructures, observation posts, weapon storage facilities, and underground targets, they are quoted as saying, during the last 24 hours. 1 Israeli soldier was announced as being killed. The Association of Rape Crisis Centers in Israel says it found evidence of systemic and intentional rape and sexual abuse during the Hamas attacks on the 7th of October. and claimed that Hamas chose to use sadistic sexual crimes in order to harm Israel strategically. An Israeli airstrike on South Lebanon killed a woman and wounded her daughter on Wednesday, state media said. At least 2 people have been killed by what has been described by Syria's media as an Israeli airstrike on Damascus. A residential building was struck in the Kafr Sousa district of the capital. Israel's military have not commented on this claim. Iran's oil minister, Jovad Oji, has said Israel was behind last week's attack on Iranian gas pipelines. The U.S. has told the International Court of Justice in The Hague that the Hamas attack on 7th of October demonstrated Israel's legitimate security needs in any solution to conflict in the region. The U.S. urged the court not to find that Israel is legally obligated to immediately and unconditionally withdraw from occupied territories, but instead to preserve and promote the established framework for reaching a two-state solution. Russia and France also made oral submissions to the court today. Sandra, what do you think of the ongoing talks surrounding Israel and Gaza?
Well, Netanyahu's already said he does not support a two-state solution. He does not support a state of Palestine. So if you start from that premise, you can see why this genocide has happened. What I don't understand is why it's been allowed to happen. It didn't just happen in October there, as everyone knows, 75, nearly 76 years of the Nakba. Basically has, the Palestinian people have suffered from that. But starting from the premise and the words that are coming out from Netanyahu's cabinet, that Palestinians are not human, they're animals, etc., you can see exactly where it's going. But what I can't understand, and many others, is why the recent, the International Court of Justice, the US voted against a ceasefire, and the UK abstained on it. Why? That's the question you've all got to ask. And then again, when the reports say things like, because of unrest, we haven't been able to get food trucks or aid into Gaza, it implies, if you're reading it, that it's the Palestinians, that's creating the unrest. But it's not. It's Israeli citizens who are stopping the aid getting in. There's kids eating grass, animal feed they're trying to feed themselves with. It's the first genocide I think anyone's seen that's been perpetrated, and it's on the screens. Everybody can see it, the TV, Twitter, etc. as well. So as far as I'm concerned, I hope I'm probably allowed to, I'm not in a parliament, so I can say the word liar. Everything that comes out of the Israeli government's mouth is lies, even regarding what they're saying about Hamas and the rapes. You don't see them talking about the fact that Israel is actually investigating rapes against its own soldiers, against the women soldiers in the IDF. We've already been well documented. So I don't believe a word that comes out of the Israeli government's mouths. And the decent Jewish people, they're suffering as well, because it's not the Jewish people, it's the Zionists that are causing this. And why, well, I think I understand why America is backing the Zionists, but why the UK, why the Western world is backing this genocide when this country of Palestine, I have a passport stamped Palestine. It did exist, and yet they want to cease to exist altogether. And these are questions which I don't think anyone's answered yet. Why are the Palestinian people being subjected to a genocide and Palestine completely removed off the map? And anyone that sits back and does nothing will be remembered for the fact that they did nothing to stop this genocide.
Sure. I suppose in the interest of time, we should be moving on, but Do you think you could quickly elaborate on what you meant by saying that you understand why America would want to back Zionists, but maybe not the UK? What do you see as the differential there?
Well,
If you
the
could,
Zionist movement started in America. Basically, the right-wing Christian Americans, they're Zionists as well. Started in America. Of course, Britain was involved in 1917, the Balfour Treaty. We are just as culpable of that. To seem to forget that it's our forefathers that created that.
Israel,
And simply because they didn't want them in Europe. America didn't want them either. They wanted them completely out the road altogether. But the Zionist movement started in America and it moved from there. So that's the reason I say about America. They
Okay,
seem to
thank you.
be so beholden to the Zionists.
Thank you so much. For our next story, the Trussell Trust says half of people receiving universal credit in Scotland are unable to afford enough food. The Trussell Trust has today published new research that reveals the devastating consequences of the inadequacy of universal credit in Scotland. The research conducted by YouGov on behalf of the Trussell Trust revealed that 35,900 people, 7% of those claiming universal credit in Scotland, have been forced to use a food bank in the last month, and half ran out of food in the last month and couldn't afford more. Also, in the last 3 months, 20% of people claiming universal credit in Scotland were unable to cook hot food as they couldn't afford to use the oven or other utilities. The survey found that 241,000 people claiming universal credit in Scotland, 47%, have either fallen behind on bills and credit commitments or are finding it a constant struggle to keep up with them. 2 in 5 people, 41%, are behind on one or more household bills. The impact of inadequate universal credit in Scotland stretches even further, with a fifth of people missing an essential appointment, such as visiting the doctor or going to work. Because they couldn't afford the cost of transport in the last 3 months, 4 in 10 people being unable to keep their homes warm this winter, and approximately 195,000 people, 38%, are skipping meals to keep up with other essential costs like utilities or rent in the last 3 months. Bizarrely, having identified the issue as the inadequacy of the support provided by universal credit, which is reserved to the UK government, the charity is urging the First Minister to prioritise support for people on the lowest incomes. The SNP has responded by calling out the UK government's shamefully insufficient benefit system and said it supports the Trussell Trust's Essentials Guarantees campaign. Commenting, the SNP spokesperson for social justice, David Linden MP, said, "The Chancellor must commit to in the spring budget to introduce an essentials guarantee to ensure that universal credit will always cover the cost of essentials. The SNP are committed to eradicating poverty in Scotland. The Scottish Government has frozen council tax, introduced the Scottish child payments and the Best Start grants, on top of protecting Scottish households from Westminster's cruel bedroom tax and benefit cap. Two things we shouldn't have to do." Sandra, passing on to you, what needs to be done above reality portrayed in these statistics, and to what extent does the Scottish Government have the capacity to do so?
I think the Scottish Government is doing its best with the powers that it has. We don't have powers over social security, employment laws, as you probably know. We're not allowed to borrow, basically. So that kind of hamstrings any government, but particularly in this instance, the Scottish Government. Basically, you know, we've increased the child payments. It all comes out of the budget. If that goes there, it's got to be taken out of something else. But the energy companies, the cost of energy is something that unfortunately we can't do anything about, but Westminster can. Basically, when you look at somewhere like France, where it was a 5% increase in the utilities, and here in the UK it was 57% increase. And these people, well, you saw the figures yourself, the millions of pounds which these companies are making in profits. There has to be a cap on these. Has to be a cap on these, and that money has to be put in to basically universal credit or some way of making sure that the cost of the utilities come down. David Linden has been very vocal on that, as has others, but David has been leading that charge. We need the Westminster Parliament to loosen these levers, give the Scottish Government full powers over social security, give us the chance to borrow, that we can actually do something about it, because when people are faced with the cost of living, and it's not just people who are on universal credit or benefits, it's also people, which I call and others do as well, what they say, the working poor, who get no help because they're just slightly over that level, but they've still got to pay the same price for goods in the shops. So we need some more powers. I think the Scottish Government has done its best, to be fair, and what we've got, the powers that we've got. But I really think they have to loosen this in Westminster and give us more powers so that we are able to make sure that people don't die of hypothermia, that kids can come home from school and do their homework or get a decent meal. It's just, there's no need for it in this day and age, and stop these big companies from making massive profits.
Thank you. For our next story, UK Trident. A Trident nuclear missile failed, plopping into the Atlantic during a test launch attended by the British Defence Secretary last month, raising questions about the efficiency and effectiveness of Britain's nuclear deterrent. The Ministry of Defence said that an anomaly occurred during the exercise involving the submarine HMS Vanguard on the 30th of January that was event-specific, implying it would not have happened in the unlikely event of a war. No further details about the embarrassing failure were provided, although the Ministry of Defence insisted that there are no implications for the reliability of the wider Trident missile systems and the stockpile. Defence sources added that Grant Shapps was present at the time the test took place. Martin Docherty-Hughes, MP, the SNP's defence spokesperson, said the failure to test launch one of the UK's nuclear missiles, combined with the immorality of the weapons, showed why the UK government are wrong to prioritise spending on weapons of mass destruction over conventional military capabilities and funding to tackle growing societal inequalities. The cost of renewing UK's Trident nuclear weapons systems is expected to exceed £80 billion, against a backdrop of a cost of living crisis in which millions are struggling to keep up with mortgage, food, and energy costs. Commenting, Martin Docherty-Hughes MP has said, "This was a seriously expensive failure, and one that is sympathetic of the UK government's wider defence spending and strategy." Symptomatic of the UK government's wider defence spending and strategy. The financial burden imposed by Trident renewal is enormous and is coming to a great cost to our conventional military capabilities and ability to focus money on other priorities like supporting households through a cost of living crisis. This is the second failed test in a row of weapons that are costing us tens of billions, an embarrassing and scandalous fact that should serve us a wake-up call to the UK government. Sandra, I suppose the question to you is, does Trident make you feel safer?
Absolutely not. And you just need to look at the amount of incidents of leaking subs in Faslane, which is not far from where I am just now, or where you are just now either. They won't even give us any reports of what's happened, what type of leaks they are, radioactive, etc. You've got school kids, you've got schools round about there, and you've got this whole population of Glasgow. So even though it happened, obviously, when it was supposedly on some kind of manoeuvre, the Faslane, the subs that are sitting there are leaking, and we can't even find out how dangerous it is for the rest of Scotland, for the whole of Scotland, Glasgow in particular. So no, I don't feel safe with the Trident nuclear submarines, and particularly this incident. It just shows you they're not fit for purpose. They're obsolete. The only reason they keep going is because it's employment in America. It's not employment here. There's about 537 people, I think it is, actually work in the Faslane base. And you can check that one out, although they keep saying it's not, but it is. There's only over 500 people work there. So I don't feel safe at all. and I don't think anyone I know feels safe with Trident there. But the big issue as well is when you mentioned how much money it costs for that. And these are the hidden costs to Scotland. We voted against Trident, but our taxes go to pay that. This is the hidden legacy that they talk about in Westminster, which we pay for. And it's obsolete. And that money could, quite rightly, be used against this cost of living crisis and take all of these people out of poverty. I'd rather see people being able to eat and heat their houses and the kids being able to go to school in proper clothes, etc. like that, than one of these things sitting in the Faz Lane, leaking and then being absolutely obsolete and not fit for purpose.
Thank you. Brexit has cost UK food companies exporting to EU an extra £170 million. Food businesses sending products to the EU have had to fork out an extra £170 million in export costs because of Brexit red tape, with the changes described as being catastrophic for some exporters. The data shows that in the 3 years since leaving the single market, exporters of food of animal origin have had to pay the sums to secure sign-offs by vets before they can send their shipments. In the past 12 months alone, exporters have paid more than £58 million. The extra costs have resulted in a sharp fall in exports, particularly among smaller producers, with the value of meat products sent to the EU down by 17% since 2019. After the UK officially left the single market in January 2021, the EU made it a requirement for exporters of food of animal origin to have vets check consignments and sign export health certificates, EHCs, before they could be sent. The UK brought in reciprocal measures last month, raising fears that some EU exporters might abandon exporting to the UK owing to the extra costs and bureaucracy. Since December 2020, the month before the UK left the single market, more than 852,000 certificates have been requested by exporters, according to analysis by the Sanitary and Phytosanitary SPS Certificate Working Group, which brings together trade bodies such as the Fresh Produce Consortium, Dairy UK, and the Road Haulage Association. Those include certificates for fish and fish products, livestock, and meat and dairy products. The group calculated that these certificates, which cost about £200 to complete, have heaped more than £170 million in added cost for exporters over the past 3 years. The SNP have said that Scottish businesses are paying the price for the Brexit-obsessed Westminster government. Commenting, SNP spokesperson for Business and Trade, Richard Thompson MP, said, "It's time for the Westminster parties to get real about the problems created by Brexit and deliver a solution that actually works for our businesses, whether that be membership of the customs union and single market, or ideally rejoining the European Union and regaining full membership. Leaving the EU has been an unmitigated disaster, costing Scottish businesses millions by rejoining the European Union's and the world's largest single market. We could end the mountain of red tape and bureaucracy that Scottish businesses are currently facing." Sandra, what do you think of Brexit's impact on economy and more specifically exports?
Mm-hmm. Well, we know that I think it was 75% of the businesses in Scotland were small businesses. We had the small business bonus, and when I was elected, my constituency of Hillhead, Kelvin, was full of small businesses, and I would go around there chatting to them, etc. And I still obviously see a lot of them, and they certainly are struggling because the extra costs, and you mentioned again in your report there about meat products, fish, etc., which, our Scottish ones are world renowned, and yet, the cost of that is becoming absolutely impossible for a lot of these small businesses to go ahead and basically export their goods abroad as well, having to fill in papers and all of this stuff. It's just bureaucracy. It's an absolute nonsense. And you can see by the amount of small businesses that are closing down, unfortunately, that this is having a catastrophic effect on small businesses, which obviously in turn is employment as well. So, I mean, Brexit has been an absolute disaster, unmitigated disaster, and small businesses are paying for it. And in Scotland's in that position where our produce is wanted all over the world. We are actually hit more than anywhere else with that. And I feel terribly sorry for all the small businesses, but we need to get something. You look at Northern Ireland now, they've got the best of both worlds. They've got part of, well, if you want to call the best of both worlds, being part of the UK, but they're also part of the single market.
And
And
that
it just
same
shows you
that
this,
same that same argument was sold to them by Rishi Sunak when Rishi Sunak was negotiating with Northern Ireland. He said,
yes.
"You are in a prime position to make use of the EU single market and the UK single market," which is a strange argument from a person that would have argued that
I
it's good that we
think
left the EU single market, I suppose.
you've hit the nail on the head there, Patrick. It was as if he was saying that, single market is wonderful, and the EU is great, but I forgot you're not in it anymore. But you are great to do it. It just shows you. I mean, have these folks any brains at all, apart from ripping off people and getting money and putting it into their bank accounts? You hit it right in the nail on the head there.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
For our next story, we're shifting our focus to the EU as Ursula von der Leyen rejects cooperation with extremist parties. The European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has said that she will never work with extremist parties such as AfD in Germany or Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party in France, no matter how big a vote they get in the next European elections. She said such parties crossed a red line for pro-Europeans like her and the center-right political groupings to which she belongs. Um, the European People's Party. I work with pro-European, pro-NATO, pro-Ukrainian, clearly supporters of our democratic values, she said, launching her official campaign for a second 5-year mandate as the president of the Commission. The question of who the EPP will work with in the next EU Parliament has become a critical one, with the rise of extremism across Europe, and polls project significant gains for populist parties in Germany, France, Italy, and other countries. Every European election brings a change in the quote again. Every European election brings a change in the composition of different political parties and different political groups in Parliament. So the content counts. Those who are defending democracy against the Eurosceptics, and those who are defending our values against Putin's friends. These are the ones with which I want to work, she said. Very sorry. Sandra, how do you interpret the political climate across Europe right now, and what do you think of Ursula von der Leyen's statement specifically?
I don't think a lot of her. I must admit, particularly in these last couple of months, where she can call, the Russian invasion against Ukraine genocide, and then does nothing about Israel. Now, she was elected. She's never been elected. Put it that way. The commissioner. It's not elected by us, by the public. So she's unelected. She came from nowhere. I think she was from Germany. She came from nowhere through the ranks, and all of a sudden she was elected to that. But her pontificating constantly in regards to never mentioning the genocide that's happening in Gaza from Israel, to now saying that basically she herself, if she's re-elected, will choose who she works with. You can't do that in a so-called democracy. She the person who's going to say, well, basically these are good people, but these are bad people. She's never criticised the Israeli government, the Zionists. She's never criticised them. So therefore, I'm assuming, and they do work with them. I mean, they send, goods, etc., that type of thing. I just think that she has absolutely no right, and unfortunately, a lot of people are losing faith in Europe because of her and her actions or inactions with the Palestinian Gaza situation.
Sure, I suppose, shouldn't a European Commission leader kind of cooperate with all countries and the people that are elected within them? Isn't it a sort of duty to maybe cooperate with these people regardless of whether she agrees with them individually?
Well, I know that they talk about fascists, which I heard there just now. Basically, they talk about terrorists, but you know Nelson Mandela was labelled a terrorist, and you know basically, so if you get people like Nelson Mandela or the South African government as they have now, I'm not. I hear a voice in the background. I'm just putting forward an issue. Somebody there mentioned fascist. I think it was you, Linda. I'm also talking about what was deemed to be terrorists. You've got the Stern Gang in Israel, the Stern Gang who murdered British people, etc., etc. That was quite a while back.
Uh-huh.
Would they be accepted by the European Commission or not accepted?
Right.
Fascists, no, I've no time for them, but I've no time for Zionists either.
But
So I
yeah.
think you have to look at what exactly people are. And to me, you're an unelected person. You've no right to say who's admitted and who's not. It's a thin line, whether it's fascist or not. It's a thin line. Nobody wants fascists like they've got in Italy and well, some in France as well, Russia too, Ukraine as well. Who do you stop?
So maybe you would argue that Ursula von der Leyen should maybe put her individual views of people aside and cooperate with countries that are with leaders that are elected in different places.
Well, you've got Ukraine, who's a member of, but you've got fascists in Ukraine as well. Is she just talking about governments, or is she talking about groups there? Yes, but that's where you have to have a discussion about that. It's not up to her who says what and who's allowed in. But it was called the IRA many years ago in Sinn Féin. They called them terrorists, but people spoke to them, didn't they?
Yeah.
I just think it's a very glib generalisation that she's saying.
No, thank.
So, well, but that's what I'm saying about, you know, okay, I don't want you in my wee group, but you can go and join another wee group. We disagree with you, but you're still allowed to go to the parliament. I mean, come on. No, no, no. But
Um, yeah.
they allowed the ones from the UK who came along with their wee flags, Farage as well, didn't they? Absolutely, I don't think she's got the right. Anyway, they wouldn't
Sorry, the
want her
question that
going
was
to be
presented by the desk. Sorry, the question that was presented by the editor was, would you, Sandra, accept? Would you be in a party or maybe accept like a coalition with somebody like the AFD or
No,
the nationalist parties present across Europe? I
no, I
suppose.
don't. No, I mean, I wouldn't accept a coalition. I don't think anybody I know or party that I know would accept being a coalition with fascist parties. They may, as Linda said, they would make a coalition of their own. But at the same time, if you're in Europe, why should they be there at all then? Surely it's up to the,
Well,
well, maybe
like the
Europe's
story kind of
got to be
mentioned,
looked at as well.
there are rises of new voices coming across Europe, and
Yeah, but I
different
just think
parties are
Europe should
flowing
be
in and
looked
out.
at as well because
Yeah.
I think personally it's getting far too big, and
Hmm.
you've got groups within these countries that they're wanting to come in who are fascists.
Yeah.
So where does it stop?
Of course, I completely understand. I think, and
Sorry
we
for
can move on to the
interrupting you.
next
Well,
story.
Linda should be saying she's sorry.
Oh no, 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 no! It's I think also I could have
Right.
presented the story a little bit better, so I will take blame. And
No, it's
as
all right,
host,
Patrick.
it's I should be mediating a bit better. So for the next story,
Well, blame.
we've got the Scottish government is supporting funeral costs. The cost of paying for a funeral can cause extra strain for many people at what is a difficult time, which is why the Scottish government's funeral support payment is intended to provide eligible people with financial support to help pay for a partner, child, parent, or sibling's funeral. The payment is available to people who receive universal credit, tax credits, and certain benefits, and are responsible for paying for a funeral. It can be paid either to parents and families, or the funeral director who is helping to plan the funeral itself. People can apply any time after the person has died until the 6 months after the date of the funeral, and are being urged to check if they are eligible and get the help they are entitled to. The average payment in the 2023 to 24 financial year to date was £1,949, and the money can be used towards burial or cremation costs and other expenses such as funeral director's fees, a coffin, or flowers. Since launching funeral support payments in September of 2019, Social Security Scotland has received over 34,000 applications, providing £41.7 million of support for people and families. Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice, Shirley Ann Somerville, said, "When families are struggling to deal with a bereavement, the last thing they need, particularly during the cost of living crisis, is to face the added worry of paying for the cost of a funeral. We also want to do all we can to prevent those who are dealing with grief getting into debt. Making sure that everyone gets the financial support they are entitled to is a basic step in putting dignity and respect at the heart of social security in Scotland." Should the Scottish Government be supporting funeral costs? What do you think?
Yeah, Patrick, very much so. I remember when I was in the Parliament, probably started 2017, 2018, we had a number of people would come to us in regards to that, and we set up a cross-party group to look at the cost of funerals. And I do want to thank Stuart McMillan, MSP, who took over that as a convener of that cross-party group and pushed for this to go through, because people then, it's even worse now obviously, people then were struggling to be able to afford a proper funeral for their families. So I think it's a very good thing, and if you had been there or you had even heard the evidence, we were in committee and that, you would see just how harrowing it was for people who just couldn't afford to bury or cremate their loved ones. So yeah, it doesn't get a lot of attention, but it certainly brought a lot of closure to a lot of people who could not afford to, give their loved ones a proper send off. So yeah, it's a very good thing.
And to finish off today, we have a video of the Health Secretary's visit to Burlough Medical Centre earlier today. We'll play that now and then discuss it after. This is Patryk Witkowski of Broadcasting Scotland, reporting from outside the Burlough Medical Centre, where Health Secretary Neil Gray will be inspecting some of the innovation technology used here, and then giving a press conference, talking to press about what he thinks of it and how it can apply to the rest of Scotland. After visiting the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow just last week, Health Secretary Neil Gray is making a visit to Burlough Medical Practice in Edinburgh. As Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray got appointed to the Health Secretary less than 2 weeks ago, this will be an opportunity to talk to staff such as nurses and managers about the difficulties and needs of the Scottish health sector. As part of a visit, Burlough Medical Practice showed off the digital platform Ask My GP, allowing patients to book and organise their appointments online alongside chatting to GPs through text or video chat. During the visit, there was an emphasis on how enhanced digitalisation of the health sector will allow for smoother and more effective workflow. Secretary Neil Gray, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Firstly, I just wanted you to talk about how you found settling into your position as Health Secretary and what your priorities are in the short term.
So I've been almost 2 weeks in post. It's been an incredible learning curve for me. I've been new to the health and social care portfolio. I'm obviously relishing the challenge. It's a great honour and a privilege for me to have been asked to oversee the support of a recovery of the NHS, which is our most cherished institution, one that touches the lives of everybody from beginning to end of their lives, and a social care system that is of critical importance to the well-being of our nation. So I know there are great challenges, there are issues that we need to address, and I'm looking forward to working across government and with the staff, trade unions and expert clinicians and advisors to ensure that we do just that.
Fantastic. And so taking a look at your visit to the medical centre today, what are some of your key takeaways and how do you think they apply to the rest of Scotland?
So I'm really pleased to be able to visit Burraloch GP practice this morning, to be able to hear about the work that they're doing to digitise their service, about how they can make themselves more efficient and provide the real improvement in service, but also the capacity to ensure that they're meeting the needs of their patients. Also to hear about the work that they're doing to develop multidisciplinary teams here, so that having advanced nurse practitioners, mental health support workers, physiotherapists and pharmacists on site alongside their GPs, to ensure that there is a person-centred approach to ensure that the care that is being provided meets the needs of those that are presenting.
Thank you. That's all. Thank you so much for taking the time.
A pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
That was good.
Sandra, in your time as MSP and working with the SNP, have you gotten much of a chance to interact with Neil Gray? Do you know much about him? Do you have hopes for him as Health Secretary? What can we expect?
Yeah, I've known Neil for quite a while. He used to work for Alec Neil, who was obviously Minister for Health, so I'm assuming that Neil's picked up a number of bits and pieces from Alec, because he obviously worked in his office. But Neil is a very nice person. He also has a background, I don't know if it's social care or not, but he always seemed to me, when I spoke to him, have a lot of time for people, wanted to make sure everyone was all right. So yeah, I think it's in safe hands. He's got a huge challenge, but I think the health service, in safe hands. We'll see how it pans out in the months to come. But yeah, he's very people focused, I'd say, and I think he'll do his best for them. Yeah.
Thank you. And looking at the time, it will. I suppose, yeah, just before we wrap up, even though obviously we are pushing the bounds of a show a bit, what do you think of this emphasis on digitalization? Do you think that putting more of this workflow onto the internet, letting patients keep track, get appointments, sometimes not even have to come in at all because they just get to text or maybe video call their GPs, how effective do you think this will be in dealing with issues faced by the health sector right now?
As long as it works, it'll be efficient. My big worry is because if it's computerised, and we've seen how some, obviously, I'm not talking about the post office scandal, it would go the same way, but I think if you've got the choice to go in and see your GP, you can choose to do that, or basically you can do it digitally. Yes, at the moment, I think people have to have the choice. I wouldn't want it foisted upon them. It worked very well in COVID, and that one, yeah, it worked very well at COVID. But I think we need to watch the run out of it and make sure that digitally is fit for purpose, basically.
Yeah, Neil Gray himself during the visit was talking about that when he speaks to people that are in need, when he talks about constituents, for example, they talk about the lack of being able to find a GP that they can visit, that they can talk to. And for him, although this digitalization thing is good, it's processing nicely, for him, it is a big focus to get people visiting GPs and to ensure that we have enough GPs to be able to meet people. I think that'll wrap us up for today. Thank you so much, Sandra White, for talking to me. You've been a fantastic guest.
Thank you, Patryk.
Just hang on a little bit. So that wraps us up for this evening. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programme will always be free to view. However, if you can afford even £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We are now just under £1,000 short of our £10,000 target. Although the pressure has eased, we really need to raise the last £1,000 immediately, so we can pay our bills and then focus on securing the future of independent broadcasting for Scotland by growing our subscriber base and regular funding. Thanks again to Sandra White, former SNP MSP, for joining us today. And goodbye. Thank you for watching.